Happy Father's Day. Welcome to our live stream. We hope you enjoyed. We can't wait to see you in the pastoral chat. God bless.
Go before you and behind you and beside you. He's for you, he's for you. He's for you, he's for
Good morning and happy Father's Day to all my fathers out there. Fathers, we love you so much. We cherish you. You guys are a huge blessing to us. I actually personally have like one of the greatest dads of all time. My dad is so good that he's one of the dads that actually all my friends back home still go and visit just him, even though I'm not home anymore, because they love him so much. So he is a very special dad, but I also understand that not all dads are like my dad. Some people don't have great dads. In fact, dads are kind of like the great unknown. Some people have loving, caring dads. Some people have emotionally distanced dads. You may have an abusive dad or a dad who's just not a part of your relationship at all. And I understand that all kinds of different dads are at play here. But for some reason at church on Father's Day, we always talk about dads like they're all perfect and wonderful like mine. But actually, the U.S. Census Bureau said that 30% of kids in America grow up without their dads in their home. And 20% of kids in America grow up with completely absent fathers, meaning they don't see or interact with their fathers for any reason at all. That's 1 out of 5 kids in America grow up without having a father. And the thing is, in America, this has become really kind of normal, as sad as it is to say. We say, oh yeah, their father's not a part of their life. And it's not a big deal. We just kind of brush it off. It shouldn't affect them too much, right? But I actually want to read you some of the most heartbreaking statistics that I've ever read in my life. I actually cried when reading these this week. But I just want to read these for you real quick. This is statistics for children that grew up in a fatherless home, okay? 90% of runaway and homeless children are from fatherless homes. The percentage of rapists with rage that came from a fatherless home is 80%. 70% of minors housed in state facilities are from fatherless homes. 39% of all inmates housed in jails in America are from homes with an absent father. 71% of all high school dropouts are from a fatherless home. The percentage of adolescents in substance abuse treatment facilities who are from fatherless homes is 75%. 71% of teenagers who are pregnant come from a fatherless home. 63% of youth suicides happen in households with an absent father. 85% of children with behavioral disorders are from homes without fathers. And yet, for some reason, we take fatherhood lightly. We act like it's not a big deal, or like I can skip out on their lives here and there for work. But fathers, you need to know you are so important. Your role in your child's life is so hugely important that it can actually make or break their life statistically. We are actually significantly handicapping our children when, as fathers, we are not a part of their life. And so I want to start out right now by letting you know your role is super important. It is greatly important. You can give your child a leg up on the world, or you can start them out on life with a handicap by not being a part of their lives. So fathers, your role is so important. Now, luckily for us, for you, I guess I'm not a father, but luckily for you, Fathers, we have a God who calls himself our Father. We have a God whose very character exhibits what it looks like to be a father. So we have all kinds of ways that we can see and learn and grow what it looks like to be a good father, so you're not alone. But I want to focus on one of them today, one specific verse from the Bible, and it's Ephesians 6:4. Okay, Ephesians 6:4, and here's what it says. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Now, I'll have to admit, when I was looking up passages that talked about fathers this week, I was really expecting most of the passages to talk about things like fathers are protectors and fathers are providers. And while those verses are there, the overwhelming majority of the verses actually talked about fathers being disciplinarians and instructors to their children. So fathers, your first and most important roles, apparently according to the Bible, is to be disciplinarians and instructors. So we're supposed to tell our children when they mess up. We're supposed to correct them. We're supposed to teach them. We're supposed to punish them. But now our verse specifically begins by saying, don't provoke your children to anger. Don't provoke your children to anger. And basically what that means is while you're disciplining and instructing, always be fair and reasonable. Always be fair and reasonable. Don't just say, oh, you messed up. You get everything taken away from you for 2 months. But rather be fair and reasonable in everything that you do. In 2 Samuel, God is talking about Solomon. And he says, I will be a father to him, and I will discipline him, but I will never take away my gracious love from him. So fathers, yes, we are supposed to be disciplinarians and instructors, but that all comes on the heels of being graciously loving to your child. Everything that you do, every action that you take with your child should start with gracious love towards them. Okay, so we're going to go and talk about disciplinary actions and instruction right now, but remember that everything that we talk about, gracious love is on the forefront of that. Okay, gracious love. Now back to disciplining. We're talking about disciplining, we're talking about correcting, we're talking about punishing, and this is super important for fathers to do, but it also says disciplining and instructing. You see, if we're just correcting and punishing and we're not teaching, disciplinary actions become moot. Right? It becomes pointless. One of my least favorite things that I hear parents say is, just do it because I said so. You've probably been guilty of that before at some point if you're a father. But you see, we can say that and get away with it occasionally, but if we're not building trust and teaching and growing our children, we're just saying, just do it because I said so. We're not really doing anything. We're not teaching them and growing them. It's like, oh, do it because I said so. Thanks so much, Dad, for helping me understand life and how to live a little bit better. Actually, when I was 5 years old, I grew up in a place called Owensboro, Kentucky. It's actually like the third biggest city in Kentucky, so it's still pretty rural, okay? I grew up on a cornfield. But when growing up then about 20 years ago, I was about 5 years old, and it was pretty normal for kids to run around by themselves. And at the end of our street, we had this thing, and it was a sewage ditch, and we called it the ditch, okay? And we were told very clearly by my parents, don't play in the ditch. And so we always avoided the ditch, and one day my friend said to me, hey, let's go play in the ditch. There's this super cool pipe down at the end that we can fit in. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll do it. So we went down, we played in the ditch for a few hours. We were really excited. It was a lot of fun. We came home. I don't know how my parents knew, but maybe it was because we came back with muddy sewage water all over us. But they immediately knew that we had been playing at the ditch, and they sent my friend home. They sent me to my room. I was in all sorts of trouble. And I remember my dad came into my room, and he said, Andrew, do you know why you're in trouble? And I was like, yeah, probably because you're mean. I don't actually know what I said. I was 5 years old. I'm just kidding. But he said, because we told you not to play at the ditch because there's rats in that ditch that carry diseases, and if one of them bites you, you could get them. He said, you're playing in sewage water, which is literally coming out of people's toilets and sinks, and it's nasty and can make you sick. He said, you could get stuck in the pipe that you were playing in and not be able to get out, and what will we do? Or you could step on something sharp in the water and hurt yourself. There was all sorts of reasons why I wasn't supposed to play in the ditch. And when my dad taught me, after he disciplined me, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I suddenly understood why I wasn't supposed to play in the ditch anymore. And the next day I remember playing with my friends and they said, hey, you want to go back to the ditch? And I said, actually, did you know that there's rats that carry infections in the ditch? Did you know that that's actually called sewage water and it comes out of toilets? I was the great teacher of all things ditch after that. But I never went to the ditch anymore because my father took the time to discipline me, but then he instructed me and I understood what I was supposed to do. So we have to make sure that all discipline is followed with instruction. Now, this is good for normal, simple, everyday life, but our verse doesn't just stop there. It says, discipline, instruct in the Lord. Discipline, instruct in the Lord. That means that we should be teaching our child. Our role is to discipline them, to show them that the rules of God matter and that we are going to punish and keep them to the rules of God, and also to teach them about the rules of God, why we believe the things we do, why God tells us to do and not do things, why we should follow them. And this is super important. But fathers, first you have to know, if you yourself don't know the discipline and instruction of the Lord, you can never teach your child. So that means as a father, you should be reading your Bible. You should be listening to sermons. You should be going to Bible studies. You should be asking questions, seeking advice about the instruction of the Lord in your children's lives so that you can teach them, because if you don't know yourself, you can never teach them. But not only that, you should also be actively living these things out in your life. You see, one of the greatest tools you have to teach your child, to discipline and instruct them in the Lord, is if you discipline and instruct yourself in the Lord. If you yourself are a living example of discipline, then your child will see that day in and day out. You see, I actually was writing my Father's Day card this year. And Dad, if you're watching this, sorry your Father's Day card is late. I just sent it. But also, just a little spoiler, I'm going to tell you what I wrote in your Father's Day card right now, so it's not going to be exciting. But I was thinking of the greatest thing my dad ever did for me. I wanted to write and tell him thank you for the greatest thing he ever did for me. And I thought long and hard about it, and I had a huge list of things that I thought he did that were so incredible, and I narrowed it down to one thing. And so I wrote in my Father's Day card, thank you for always being the greatest example and inspiration in my life. You see, my dad did a lot of really incredible things for me. But the greatest thing that he ever did for me was be an example of Christ's discipline and instruction in his everyday life, because I never had to wake up and wonder, what does it look like to live a life that loves Christ, that is walking in the way of the Lord, because I saw it happen in front of me every day. I never had to question when he disciplined me why it was important, because I saw him live it out and I saw the fruits of it in his life every single day. Dads, the greatest gift that you can give your child of all is yourself walking in the way of the Lord, living a life that loves and glorifies God in every step you take. Now, I want to finish up with one last thing, and I'm going to actually switch verses really quickly to Proverbs chapter 23:24, okay? Proverbs chapter 23:24, and it says, the father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. Rejoices in him. You see, all of this work, Dad, all of this discipline, all of this instructing, all of this gracious love is actually to result in your joy. It's actually for your joy. It will bring you joy when you do all these things, when you love your child well, when you show them what it's like. You will actually swell up and well up as joy in your life. So I actually started this with some pretty heartbreaking statistics, I know, but I want to finish it with some heartwarming statistics, if that's okay. So I know these are, my earlier statistics were from like the U.S. Census Bureau and the Department of Justice and Center for Disease Control and things like this. These last statistics, I'm going to say, to be fair, are from a social survey, okay? But I still think that they're very interesting and relevant. It says 90% of dads out there really enjoy being a dad and consider it the most exciting part of their life. 85% of fathers who are active in their children's life consider being a dad the best job in the world. 73% of dads didn't even think their life began until their first child was born. 62% of dads are hungry for more info on how they can be better dads because they enjoy it so much. You see, when you decide to be a dad, and when you do it well, when you buy in, you're giving a great gift to your children. You're giving them a leg up, but you're also giving yourself a great gift. There's a lot of pressure in being a dad because we read the statistics. It's scary if you're not there for your kids. But dads, lead from pleasure, not pressure today. Lead your children in rejoicing, not from fear today. Because your kids need you, and you have such an important role in their lives. Dads, we love you. You're one of the greatest blessings in our lives. Thank you for everything that you do.
Good morning. Happy Father's Day. Welcome to the Quarenstream. Today we are in our new setup. We hope you like it. You saw worship at church. The sermon was at church. Now our chat is also at church. So we're slowly working towards what it will look like to come back. But obviously we're being very flexible and taking it step by step and trying to put everyone's safety first. So this is just our first initial steps to now being at church again. So first, I want to say Happy Father's Day to our resident father here, father of the church, Louis Eugene King. We are very grateful for you. We appreciate everything that you do. Louis is such a dad. This morning, he bought bagels for us, and he specifically was heating up bagels, and he said, Andrew, I got you the cheddar jalapeno bagel because I know that's your favorite one, and I'm going to put plain cream cheese on it because I know that's what you like. And I thought that was so sweet, just such a sweet little dad touch. My dad used to do that kind of stuff to me all the time, so it reminded me of him. Also, I've already talked about you a little bit, but hi, Daddy. I love you. Happy Father's Day. You're my hero. Aww. But with that being said, I want to jump into our chat today a little bit. We're talking about Ephesians 6:4 primarily. It says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Okay, so obviously we're talking about fathers, and the first thing that I talked about in my sermon was these heartbreaking statistics. If you guys were paying attention, that's almost like a weird call out. I didn't mean that, but we were talking about these statistics and about the fact that when fathers aren't a part of children's lives, it really puts a huge toll on the child, right? It really handicaps the child going forward. And that doesn't mean that you may have not grown up with a absent father and have been super successful and been super healthy and found your way out of it, but it means that you were extremely disadvantaged from the beginning, right? And so we all have very different experiences with fathers. So I just want to take a second at the beginning, just kind of talk about fathers. What did that look like for you? How did that affect you growing up? And just kind of real quick with that.
Yeah, well, for myself, we grew up in an immigrant family, and my dad, I think it's like a jigsaw puzzle. If I look at the 45 years of just growing up with my dad and just having him as a dad, it's been kind of like a jigsaw puzzle where, the very first pieces, you don't really know what it looks like. And as a child, because I didn't speak Korean very well, it was really hard to communicate to my dad. And he didn't speak English very well because he came here in the 70s. And so it really was a period where I was trying to figure things out. Mm-hmm. I'd watch TV. I'd watch a lot of the programs, and I'd see what I guess a North American family would look like, and it really didn't resemble that growing up. But as I began, now as a father of three, I have a lot more pieces of that puzzle. Mm-hmm. And when I think about my dad on Father's Day, and just in general, I think, oh my gosh, he was kind of silent. We really didn't have any communication in terms of the freedom to express ourselves in our heart language. But I see over the years as I'm being a parent, I see how amazing his journey has been. He came here really with little to no money. I think a Koreans, we kind of have that similar experience. Little to no money. He had many businesses going on, and he just put a lot of emphasis on just my upbringing and paying for a lot of the things that were afforded to me. And at 45, I think, my gosh, maybe when I was a teenager, I thought, man, this sucks. What am I, But then as a 45-year-old and parent of 3, I think, wow, he did quite an amazing job. I don't know, I really don't know if I could have done that myself. Like, just drop me in another country without any of the language and culture preparation and raise kids and not have any networks and friendships and relatives to lean on. I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So, as I think about Father's Day, every Father's Day that goes on, I go, wow, what an incredible, incredible feat that he's overcome during these years. And so, I know we have some certain similar circumstances, but
Mike is giving me the eye.
yeah,
You have
gotta
to
put
go
this up closer.
Oh, say hi, Mike.
Wow,
Say hi,
yeah.
Mike.
You guys get to see Mike for the first time ever.
These holidays, it's very interesting to me. And I hear sometimes that Hallmark makes up these holidays to sell cards. So I'm just, but it's good because we take a day to honor people and things that we really do appreciate and we want to remember. I think Father's Day, or as like Mother's Day, it's complicated, right? Because we human beings are complicated. And I think about my dad, and I've had such a journey of making these things make sense. And I'm realizing more and more that we are not one-dimensional, right? And so my father, he passed away in 2008, and so I miss him. I think we would laugh a lot more now, but growing up, he wasn't the best dad, and I say that because, immigrant families, he kind of, we didn't really have conversation. He grunted a lot, I'm like, why, but now having my own children, I do a lot of grunting too, because I'm like, oh my gosh. So I think just thinking about those kind of things, I look at my dad as not just my dad, but as a person with his history and the context in which he lived, right? And I mean, he was born in 1930. The Japanese colonialism, he went through the Korean War, and then immigrated here to the US in the 80s. And just reading more about American history now, I find that it was, like you said, an incredible journey. And so I think as a parent, if my children were to look back and not see me just as mom, or just, someone who makes their meals, but someone as a person with my own history of the journey that I've taken, I think that would probably be the greatest gift to me. So I think when I see fathers out there, it would be such an honor to really see our fathers, not just as dads, but to really take a moment to get to know who these men are. Like, where do you come from? What kind of history and context have you lived in? And how much have you grown? Because we're people who grow too, right? And so it is complicated and at the same time so beautiful. And I think, like, when you talk about the fatherlessness and all of this stuff, it's the context in which we live too, right? Why were these fathers absent? What prevented them from being able to be present with their children? So for me, as we celebrate fathers, I would love to delve more into the history and of each person and as a bigger context and where they're from. And I think that would be very honoring.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So basically, what we're trying to tell you is that we all have different experiences with fathers. We understand that all of you will have different experiences than us with fathers, even. And fathers affect our lives in huge ways, right? They make a huge impact in our lives and the way that we lived and the way that we see the world. And of course, it changes as we grow up, some like you guys talked about. But either way, the role of a father is honestly one of the most important roles that God has placed in each of our lives, right? Is that we have a father, and how that father plays into our lives really does affect us in a lot of ways. So Paul talks out with his, or starts with his little message that we said, and it says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger."
Too late.
Too late, right? I know, like, Eli looks angry back there right now that he has to be here, but we talked about that it looks like being fair and punishment, and also it looks like gracious love. That's what not provoking your children to anger looks like. We obviously can't control if our kid just gets angry no matter what, but what we can do is we can graciously love them and be fair to them. And so I want to know, as a parent, what does that look like to give gracious love? It's like, it's one of those things that we're supposed to do to all people as Christians, but when it becomes in your household with your child nonstop, it's a lot harder to give gracious love and be fair all the time. So what does it look like? How hard is it? And I also want to know, how has your relationship with God affected the way that you give gracious love to your children? And how has that changed it over time?
Well, I think for myself, when you say gracious love, I don't think of giving something. I think of being something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about our children and just raising children, and hello to all you first-time fathers out there, as well too in our church. But for Anna and I think one of the common things is we try to be as transparent and as responsible about ourselves to our kids as much as possible. So, you can say, oh, how do we give gracious love? Well, in some ways, it's owning up to your mistakes as a parent. We mentioned this on Mother's Day, but being a student of your children is probably one of the greatest things you can do. Instead of trying to always impart things, and I do that to my kids just being a Korean dad, it's in me to tell them what to do. But then I think the biggest thing here is trying to shift my disposition and say, I'm a student of this kid, so now I need to go back and go, what am I learning from this child about myself that I need to correct or that I need to grow from? And so we often find ourselves with our kids saying things like, hey, I dropped the ball. Mm-hmm. And coming very transparently. Because I think gracious love, it's not just about taking care of it, but it's actually building a relationship. Because I know, I can be a little stern with the kids growing up, believe it or not. But then I think, also giving those moments of transparency and significance and that heart-to-heart communication, I think that is ultimately one of the most precious things you can give to a child on a consistent basis. So when I think about gracious love, I think about myself and being not just offering things to the kids, but offering a deeper part of me to the kids.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's good too, because you talked about how it's giving yourself, right? And this gracious love can be separate from the child's actions. So the child can be not acting graciously. The child can be acting wild and doing whatever. If you look at the story of the prodigal son, for example, the child's doing all sorts of things, but the father's gracious love is constant, right? And I think that even in that story, part of what brings the child back is that the father's gracious. And so he's able to come back into that scenario, and it's hard at first, but he walks back into it. And so I think that's an important thing for fathers to know too, that this gracious love that we're talking about is completely separate from the child's actions. It does not depend on what the child does whatsoever. It is still your role as a father to give gracious love constantly, right?
Mm-hmm. I think when I look at my dad, he was rough because, he's been through the war. He had PTSD, I'm sure. So it was really tough, actually. But the one thing I do always remember is that I knew that I could always go back home, So there were a lot of moments where it was really hard. And when I say that he wasn't the best father, I don't think he knew the skills of fathering, you know. So for him, just surviving those things, but he did the best that he could to provide for me, right?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, he was the best father that he could have been. And I think we build from there, right? And because he was able to give me those things, I'm here. And when I look at him, in his last days, we spent more time together, and we had a lot of deep conversations. And I remember him saying, "I'm sorry." And I think that's what you talk about, Louis, when we can be transparent. And he says, "I didn't know some of these things, you know, and that's why I did some of these things." Yeah. And so for me, that's actually what makes him the best father, not because of the things he didn't do or he did do, but because he was able to impart to me a part of who he was as he was growing. Yeah. And I think that is the best gift, and I think that's what God does for us. He continues to, and I've been a wild child too, so I've done a lot of things I probably shouldn't have, but I always knew that my dad would be there to, like, I had a space in his home, you know, and for that I'm forever grateful. And to me, he was the best father, you know, as much as I say he wasn't the greatest dad because he didn't have the skills, but for me, he always had that place for me. And I think my favorite verses are, "In my Father's home, there are many rooms," right? And so I think, you know, having the history that I have with my, you know, dad and my different moms and stuff, my dad always felt tender towards me because he knew maybe I didn't always feel belong. Yeah. So for him, it was important for me to know that I always belonged with him. And I think that's what God does, you know. So it's about really giving of ourselves, and we can't give of ourselves unless we befriend ourselves, right? So the greatest job of a father, I think, as Louis said, is to befriending God and befriending ourselves so that we can eventually give that to our children.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways also, like in my relationship with God, one of the first confessions I had was, someone asked me, "So who are you in God?" And it just came out, I'm a child of God. I'm God's, you know, and when I became a Christian, I remember the Lord saying to my heart, "Louis, my son, read my word." And I thought, like, for that one moment, I just thought, oh, I belong. Like you said, I really belong to God. Like, it's that, you know, as like close as we can kind of call it in terms of our relationships and networks, it is that father or that parent-child relationship that is so to the core of who we are. Yeah. And so for calling God Father, Dad, you know, that's something that, like, you know, it fulfills every deepest thing that I had in me, and that I needed to connect with in God. And so that was probably the biggest turning point in my life, when I really saw God as like my parent. And then I think from that point on, in some ways, I love my parents and they did a great job. Look at me. But, you know, but the thing is, I'm like, but he still needed to reparent me.
Sorry.
I know. But I feel like in some ways God is reparenting me. Like reparenting some of the things that disappointments or just things that I feel somewhat deprived of. I feel like he's been reparenting me into a place of like wholeness. And so
that's good. That's really good. And so gracious love plays a huge role in being a father. But one way that we can graciously love our children is actually something that we don't really consider gracious love all the time, which is discipline and instruction. Right? It's actually a way that I think God graciously loves us, is that he disciplines us, he teaches us so that we can grow and learn, right? Being gracious is not always just being kind and letting everything go, but being gracious is also teaching you along the way. And so it may not feel good, but it is a part of the love that God gives us. And so I want to know, how has discipline and instruction been beneficial to you as parents? What does it look like for you guys as parents just on a day-to-day basis? And what are your best tips for discipline and instructing? Specifically, though, our verse says, in the Lord, right? Discipline and instructing in the Lord. And so I think this is an important aspect for us to remember. A lot of times we discipline and instruct based on earthly principles, right? But it's just as important for us to discipline and instruct on godly principles. Why are you about to laugh at me the whole time? and what the Bible is teaching. So what does discipline and instruction look like for you guys? And yeah.
Go ahead, honey.
It's Father's Day. Well, I think I'm learning that discipline means teaching, right? But I think when we think of discipline, we automatically go to punishment, right? And so I think we can become very punitive because we feel angry. And I'm realizing in my own parenting, I'm not a dad, but in my own parenting, I feel when kids do something or they make a mistake and I sense this anger, I don't mean to, but I do punish often. And so I keep coming back to what would God do with me, right? And he teaches me. And I know that God is so big and so creative that he doesn't have to hurt me to teach me something purposefully. You know, will I hurt if I make a mistake? Probably because of my own consequences. And that happens in life, right? But sometimes I do have to, this is why I think as a parent, I have to step back a little bit and go, I want to hurt this child, you know. Did I say that out loud, you know? Because in some ways it feels so personal to me, right? Something about my parenting, it's about my kids, you know, this is my house and you did something to break my rules, right? And it can get really murky. I think the best times that my children have learned, or as they tell me, is when I've been able to step back. They are not necessarily my kids, my possession, you know. I don't have to teach them my ways per se. So for me, it's not about sitting them down and saying, well, you did this and this and this, so what does the Bible say, right? I can't do that. But from the very beginning, if I can take a step back and detach, right, myself from this parenting or whatever it is important to you at that time, I think I can remember, you know, I'm not the one who has to do everything on my own. I can allow God to speak to them as well, right? Because God does speak to our children, right? If God didn't speak to our children, we, you know, because like now God's speaking to me, I can understand my parents better, right? That they were going through similar things as we were. And so teaching them in the Lord kind of for me means that I kind of remove myself and step away and don't take things so personally, right? And allow God to have that space even within our children. Probably for most parents, our children are probably the most important people or, you know, in our lives, right? And so that makes it really hard and to take a step back and allow God to move and trust God in the process of it. And that can look very different in different times. But I think that's been a very difficult discipline for me as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, yeah, this topic, disciplining, you know, just like I got spanked sometimes when I was a kid, you know, just, you know, some chopsticks here and there.
Some chopsticks.
My mom would take a little chopstick and just hit the back of my, you know. But God must have used that.
My mom didn't do that.
Yeah, of course your mom didn't do it. She used a spatula maybe.
Now she has chopsticks in her home, I heard.
She does, yeah.
Watch out.
But, you know, I think, you know, it's not easy. You know, parenting children. I thought it would be much easier. But, you know, I realized, you know, kids, you got to give them a lot of space to just grow. I think the word for discipline in Greek is the same word for gymnasium. And so there's a lot of training involved. And so when we think about discipline, discipline your child, go get the rod, you know, go get the stick, right? We're not meaning that. We're meaning training and just kind of coaching and walking people through something. And we're not perfect at that at all, to say the least, but it's important. I think that's the one thing. It is very important to, you know, I think even with our children, like being stern when we need to be. Yeah. And so for myself, I need to be stern to just get some points through, but also I try to be high affection. So when we're talking about disciplining, I also like to bring a lot of affection in there as well too. Because I don't like, you know, like for instance, my son is doing summer school and I want him to, you know, be disciplined about hitting those hours in the morning and, you know, 4 to 6 hours of just working. So I get on his case and I will get on his case. Right, Elijah? Okay. But, but the thing is that sometimes we just leave it there as parents. And from all the research I've read, it's important that they hear "I love you." It's important that they get hugs. It's important that they get a high degree of affection, so that they can find that balance. That it's not just about doing things and getting great marks and but that we would actually spend time in a lot of physical comfort. And so for me, like high affection, kind of like high kind of authoritative type of thing as well too. Balancing that out is very important as a dad.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
So you literally bring gracious love into discipline.
Yes.
That's good. That's good. So, all right. So we'll wrap it up. This is our last question, but ultimately, we talked about this a little on Mother's Day. What being a parent is raising kids to be God-loving, responsible, good citizen adults apart from you, right? Because your role is not to just raise a child to live in your house forever, at least hopefully, I would think, right? So what is the one biggest lesson that you've learned so far, and what are your best tips for dads just in general as we move forward?
Well, one of the things that we do, and I've mentioned this before, but just trying to be very consistent about praying with the children, because they're still young, and I think praying every night, and I've noticed that I sometimes even praying with the kids as a father, I want them to know that we pray at night and we thank God for all the things that went throughout the day. But for me, it's always trying to keep that prayer. I know it sounds weird, but I want to keep that prayer fresh. It's easy to start praying and saying the same things, like almost like a robot. And so, when I get there and we get down, we start praying, I always want to keep it fresh and alive as my relationship is alive with God. And, eventually, like they say, you kind of give that relationship, give these kind of like little, like, connection points with the kids and God, and eventually we're really praying that they too will take that for themselves later on and just say, hey, you know what, this was really big for me, like that's the one consistent thing that really happened every night. We keep praying and we're just praying that eventually they'll transfer the title over to God and say, this is something that's very important. That's what we do every night, and we think and we process through the lens of just connecting with God and Dad. And so, that's my prayer, that would just keep going on and on and on and on.
That's good.
I want to, when my children grow, so like raising kids, I'm realizing that if I didn't have Louis, it'd be very difficult. Although he makes it very difficult for me sometimes.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm just joking. But, sometimes dads do these things and you're like, oh my gosh, right? Like you get him all ready for bed and then he'll come and rile them up, stuff like that. But especially as they get older, I'm really grateful because I don't think I could do it by myself, really. I feel like maybe I can meet their physical needs, but I think just without his presence in their lives, our lives would be drastically different.
Yeah.
But I know there are a lot of people who are hurting because that's exactly the case. Either their fathers are not available, or fathers have passed, or for whatever reasons, fathers are just not involved in their lives. And that could be because of so many different things. And as we know, like systemically, it's not easy for fathers, and even just different people's lives and different journeys. And I would love to learn more about what's happening. But I think I would want my children to grow with this deep compassion, knowing that we're not all perfect, right? But that they've had good things in their lives. And I hope that with the love that they've received, they can be people who pay that forward. That they could become, like Elijah could become his, a good father. And my children would begin to recognize, oh, wow, I've been really blessed. And God is also in my life. So I would want my children to grow up to be the kind of people where they experience the love of the Father and to be able to share that love with others, right? And and Father's Day, Mother's Day, all these Christmas holidays, I know everybody loves it, but on the flip side, it's really hard for a lot of people. Maybe there are fathers, or there are men out there who want to be fathers and who aren't able to, or like I said, just different situations and circumstances. So I guess want to say, I want to bless those people.
Yeah.
That you do have a heavenly Father, and that you guys can be the fathers. And I think church as a whole, we have to teach fathers, to be fathered by each other. And so as hard as that can be sometimes, I think it can be very hopeful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the church is supposed to do, to be mothers to the motherless, to be fathers to the fatherless, to be a place where we are creating new systems where each person can be the best that they can be.
Yeah.
Definitely have like father figures, that is, like, just shout out to Wally if you're seeing this. Just people like him and like that, who can really fill that role in different ways.
Yeah.
One verse that keeps coming to mind is, it's your kindness that leads us to repentance. And I thought, wow, as a father myself, that's a very hard thing to do. Like, being so kind to your child that they're like, oh, I gotta repent, Dad, right? But if you think about it, that's something that God does for us on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I think that's impossible. But then if I allow myself to experience that type of love from God, then it's actually more possible. And so I think that's the key. And so that keeps ringing in my head, because I was like, if I keep tapping into the Father's love in heaven, then it gives me more space with my kids. And so today is not about being a better dad or being a better parent. It's really about, allowing God to love you more, and so that you can be kind to yourself, therefore kind to your children.
This morning I wrote a little text to Louie's dad, and I was thinking, what can I say, right? And I read it in Korean. And so I was thinking, and I wanted to thank him for being a good father to Louie, and a good grandparent to my children. And I thought about it, and he's a big guy, right? So I was like, I just kind of think he's like big and strong, right? And when you think of the concept of father, that's kind of what you like, stable, right? But I ended up writing, thank you, because he's in his mid to late 70s now. I think what I was really grateful for was that love is actually a burden, right? That love it feels good and it's a wonderful thing, but when you love someone, and the more you love, it is actually a great burden, and it's heavy, right? So I wrote, thank you for carrying the burden of loving us, right? First it was Louie and Julie, and now it's including our family and our kids. And I really felt like he was the one who was carrying all of that in his heart and on his back, and someone who was really, because it hurts sometimes, right? So when I see God the Father and even Jesus on the cross, I think it's a burden. And if anybody here is loving, I think we have the Father's burden, right? And so I think for Father's Day, or any day as Christians, we are experiencing that great burden of love. And it's not just a feel-good thing, but love actually is a burden.
Yeah, that's really good. So my father's tip from the authority of I had a good dad, since I'm not a father, was my dad would always tell me, my first job is to love your mother well, and that's part of being a good father. And so I think that's important too, right? It really is.
Really. Well, I always say, when we do well, we all do well.
Exactly. And so my dad would always tell me that. I'm going to love your mother well, and that's loving you well. And so I think that's a really good tip as well. With that being said, we are going to go ahead and go to our announcement slides and our outro, and we will be back for the pastoral chat. Before we go, I do want to tell you, fathers, we did get you a gift, and it's probably in the mail. So we didn't forget about you. Be looking in the mail. You'll have something soon. Just a little token of our appreciation for who you are. And so, we love you, and we'll see you back at the pastoral chat in just a second.
Hi, HLA. This is Ella and Sugar. This summer, I'm going to be doing nothing, so bummer. And the House LA announcements are on Tuesday at 8:30 is a men's call with Pastor Andrew, and on Thursday at 7 p.m. we have a Bible study, and on Sunday at 9:30 we will have a prayer call. And don't forget to tithe. Bye.
Hey House LA, it's the Sanchez family. We just wanted to check up on you guys, see how you guys doing. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. And we miss you guys. We love you. We miss church. We're doing okay. You know, we're nice and healthy. We want to introduce you to one of our new members of the family, Bear. And yeah, we're staying busy. You know, we have a lot of projects here at home. This is one of them, swing set for the kids. And yeah, we love you, we miss you. We can't wait to go back to church.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.
Bye.
Welcome back. Man, it was good to see Renee, one of our great fathers in the House LA. I call him Papa sometimes too.
Poppy.
Was that weird? But yeah, so welcome back. If you have a question, a comment in the chat, please drop it. Also, this week, we got Mike, of course, always, but Jolene's here too. So if you have a question for Jolene, put it in the chat and we'll make her come over here and talk to you too, because she is a special leader in our church. And so I'm sure you guys want to hear from her more than you want to hear from us anyways.
John said hi. Chip, your dad chimed in. Said hello.
Hello, hello.
Charles Lee. Also a dad at our church.
Yeah, happy Father's Day, Charles.
Yay.
Let's see. Your dad had a good point in here. But Brian Singer joined. He commented.
Who?
Brian. Not Singer, sorry. It's a singer here. But Brian, he went to Nashville.
Oh, Brian Cliffs.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Brian Singer.
He commented.
Hey, Brian.
Chip mentioned, great point, the word disciple means, quote, teaching or training. In Greek, it is the same root as, quote, disciple, which means learner.
And apparently gymnasium.
Yeah. I think it's Gunamai or something like that.
So
Oh
we
yeah,
just have
Aguna
to-
Matata.
Yeah. We just have to make our kids run around and train them.
Come on, Jolene, that was funny. No, thank you,
I just want to know why the kids haven't got an invitation to that little playground at the Sanchez family's house.
Dude, that thing's awesome.
Right, that's a legit playground in the house.
And there's always birds there.
I know.
For Mother's Day, like to deliver the gift, I was like surprised by how giant.
I know. It is
It's
really.
Thanks
pretty
for the
too.
invite.
They have like birds that like are alive.
Yeah.
Sounded like Disney chirping.
I know, you're like in a bird sanctuary.
You LA people don't know what birds sound like.
I know, I'm like,
Incredible.
I got my BB gun.
Oh my god.
Oh, gosh.
Anything else, Mike? Anything in the chat?
It says, Chip says, who disciplined Andrew the most, Don or Chip?
So I will say that when we would get in trouble, if we were gonna get spanked, I would say who's gonna spank me, mom or dad? Because dad would just go, ugh, and he would just barely touch me, right? And mom, she didn't hit that hard either. They were very gracious and loving, but she definitely swung a little harder than dad. So
That's moms for you. We don't
exactly.
joke around.
So yeah.
Well, you know, in Canada, you get spanked by hockey sticks.
Oh.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
What happened
but
to the
you know what?
chopstick?
Moose
but
antlers
like,
or
'cause I
something?
heard like in Hispanic cultures that they spank with a chancla, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the sandals.
Yeah, the sandals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd much rather get hit by a chancla than a hockey stick.
I
I'm
would.
just
No,
saying.
no.
I don't know if you
Actually,
would.
No, we had to ask Patty because I'm sure there's a special way.
No, I just thinking Canadian, you know,
Yeah, no.
Canadian spankings are much worse.
You guys don't spank in Canada. You just smile at each other.
We go sorry, right?
Oh, have a good day, eh?
Wow.
Wow.
Really? Sungmar, are you gonna say anything about that? You just like insulted our whole country.
Hey, I think I shouted out a Canadian this week at some point.
Jen, Pastor Andrew seems to be avoiding me to play basketball. I got tested and I'm COVID-free. The only thing
Wait, who said that?
Sungmo, we've been trying to get together to play
Oh, he's
basketball,
saying
but
you're scared.
I've been busy this weekend because Michael's in town, and so
he thinks you're scared.
I'm
though.
scared of him.
Oh,
I am
okay.
scared of him. Yeah, yeah, for sure. But
I don't know. I'm gonna have to record that because that might be
Interesting.
interesting to see.
yeah,
Because
Remember,
Louis
you
only
repre-
plays with Louis.
Sungmo, you represent Korea and Canada, so I need
it's
to.
a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
don't let me down, Sungmo.
Yeah.
All right. Any announcements?
I don't think so. Jolene, anything you want to say? Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day if you guys can't hear her. No. Are there any announcements? I kind of cut you off without letting you answer.
Yeah. No.
Prayer topic updates. Brian's recovery.
Brian's recovering.
Jennifer's still
recovering, and just always constant prayers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry,
You just cut us off?
camera's off.
Oh.
Oh, can they still hear us?
Nope.
No. All right.
Oh, yeah, they can hear you.
Oh, they can hear.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
our camera battery just died.
Yeah.
We're still here, but yeah, that's true. Unity in the body.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely.
Oh, is that prayer
Hmm?
topic?
Prayer topic. Yeah. So, our camera's back on,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, I've been personally learning a lot about American history lately, and it's been really interesting.
Yeah.
And so if you guys want to learn with me, you can email me. I'll send you the stuff that I've been reading and I've been learning, and just, it's...
A lot about Black history.
Yes, absolutely. And as a family, we've been watching more
Yeah.
movies.
We're watching, what do we watch?
We watched Ruby Bridges.
Ruby Bridges.
Aquila and the Bee.
Aquila and the Bee.
Boy Who Harnessed the Wind.
And yes, and they were.
yeah.
I'm sorry, but I cried through all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that
Yeah.
we continue to have these discussions. And
Yeah.
even though we might not be talking a lot about it right now, at least I want those of you who may be interested, I'm still committed to learning
I think
Yeah.
if
and
we
being
care,
educated.
Yeah, if we care, we'll educate ourselves.
Yes. So
And
I think
so-
right now I'm just in the posture of learning,
Yeah.
and so I've been just doing it, reading the new Jim Crow.
You've been taking a course at Yale.
No, there's a free Yale course
Yes.
that's
On Black American history.
emancipation to emancipation to the present, learning the
Okay.
history. So I've been listening to a lot of lectures, just whatever I can to learn more. And I think American history is so fascinating. You can't, from the very beginning, it was. This is just the whatever, but it just, if you are interested, it is our responsibility as individuals to continue in the learning spirit.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to ever talk with me, at least, I can share what I'm learning.
Yeah, definitely. That's great.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well, with that, I guess we will wrap up today. Happy Father's Day, dads. We love you. Let's pray really quickly. I'll pray today, since you guys are both parents. You're not a father, but you. So.
Thank you.
So let's just pray real quick. Dear Lord, we want to thank you so much for another opportunity to get together and talk a little bit more about you, learn a little bit more about you, Lord. We thank you that you were our Father first, that you taught us what it looks like to be a father, that you continue to teach us what it looks like to be a father, and just to love us with such gracious love, but also firm discipline and instruction, Lord. And we wouldn't be who we are and growing without you. And we really want to thank you for earthly fathers that you gave us too, Lord. The people who have sacrificed so much of their life to discipline and instruct us, to give us gracious love. And so I just want to pray for those fathers today. I pray that you continue to build them up, that you continue to teach them and strengthen them, Lord, because when a father's strengthened, our world is strengthened. And so I just really pray for fathers today, Lord. Fathers everywhere, good fathers, bad fathers, absent fathers, whatever it is. We're praying for them today, Lord, that they can make an impact in their kids' lives that really matters, that gives them a leg up on life, that shows them a little bit more what you look like. And so we're just really thankful for you, thankful for dads today. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Bye, guys.
We love you guys.